Happy equinox, everybody. Um, Welcome to another one of my videos. Thanks so much for joining me and ideally, watching um, as I move through kind of a complex and challenging topic in these interesting and trying times. My mind was originally primed to talk about this topic yesterday by listening to one of my favorite YouTube programs, The Majority Report. Um, and they did another, amazing interview with an author and law professor, Jody Armour, um, who wrote a really provocatively named book, N-word Theory. It's spelled, kind of on the book in a way that, should elicit response, I think, from everybody who looks at it. But just listening to them riff with each other really kind of primed me to talk about the work that we've been doing this year. And today felt like the right time to talk about it. Today is the equinox, and so it is a solar holiday. It is one of the quarter markers of the year. It is when the sun is at its equal length between between the day. So the day and the night are equal length, quote unquote, today. So in the solar holidays, we heal the divine masculine through our ritual cycle this year. I have lots of points of view about about the sun in relationship to the divine masculine, but that's what we've chosen to focus our year of ritual on. So in that way, it felt right to focus on the idea of work and how we can arise each day and engage in spiritual practice through reifying the spiritual truth in day-to-day life. And the way that we hold all of it in our discipline, our daily practice, is more important than what we hold in our spiritual truths, or what we purport to believe when we're at church, whatever that means for us, right? Because there is this distinction and dichotomy, right, between I think a lot of folks get caught up in this, especially in the West. Folks who are raised in any sort of Judeo-Christian framework, that there is the sacred and that there is the profane. And either you have entered into the sacred and everything is this kind of beautiful, sacred, holy sort of energy, and everything out there is just the profane, and it's it's not quite up to our holy standards, right? And that's effectively kind of what we get at when we talk about the ideas of holier than thou, right? When someone says, like, any sort of statement that says I am holier than thou, they're inherently acknowledging I'm not like that. But what they're really kind of saying is I'm not like that right now. I'm not triggered, so I'm not being shitty to you right now. And so I was, like I said, I was primed by this conversation during the day, and then I went for a run through the place I live now, which is kind of my ancestral hometown of Lawrence, Massachusetts. And I was running and, kind of visiting some places that I hadn't visited in a long time, running by the mills that my immigrant ancestors worked in when they first arrived. And my mom drove by me on her way home from work, because she still works in Lawrence. And so we got to talking, and I said, hey, why don't you just give me a ride the rest of the way? we started talking about this idea of being worthy, and it had popped into my head. Like I said, I was primed, and the distinction given by this author Jody was, and I just thought it was such a beautiful distinction to draw. The wicked and the worthy, wicked and the worthy, and this thinking is so pervasive in our uh, in the way that our thinking about justice is informed. And this year I've been working on a pretty challenging series of mediated conversations, and it's really, it hasn't changed the way that I've viewed justice. Spirit changed the way I viewed justice years ago, but this has really been for me one of the most powerful experiences of testing and pressure testing, I think is the word that a lot of my martial arts buddies use. Pressure testing my assumptions about a different way of holding justice, an inclusive form of justice, a way of holding justice that moves beyond good and evil. I won't reference Nietzsche in that for anybody who gets the reference. But moving beyond this idea that you are good until you're evil, and once you're evil, there's no coming back. I don't believe in it. I don't believe that that's true. I don't believe that that is the way that we see ourselves through this jump in consciousness. I don't believe that that is the way that we evolve as a species. So, taking from the baseline, good and evil aren't things, right? Just remove those from your framework. Good and evil aren't things. They are acts, they are decisions. Sure, maybe. They're conditions that we find ourselves living in, maybe. If one finds themselves in an evil world, acting evil is perceived as good. If one lives in a good world, perceiving good is not really good. It's just normal. It's normative. So the way that my partner Biz and I talk about this in our own dialogue with one another, and we're really grateful to this. It was an Israeli researcher, is a sociologist, who came up with the term salutogenic as opposed to pathogenic view on unwellness, right? And so we tend to refer to it as the salutogenic model versus the pathogenic model. So in the pathogenic model, we believe once you're evil, you're evil. In the salutogenic model, we recognize the series of, as I've mentioned in previous videos, the inputs that go into actions and the outcomes that arrive from those inputs. And so this wicked versus this worthy construct effectively go out the window. And the way that we hold ourselves accountable to allow for a world where we can move beyond the retributive, I'll say it a different way. In a lot of frameworks on justice today, we believe effectively in revenge, retaliation, and retribution, right? I thought, again, this, the three R's that the interview was kind of really focusing on. Whereas in the spiritual framework, this kind of love and light model, we say, reconciliation, redemption, and restoration. So, for us, we use the word restorative justice, but what does that really mean? So, in terms of the dialectical that we look at here, we like to kind of joke that on the other side of love and light is blood and fire. Love and light, blood and fire, right? So reconciliation, redemption, and restoration, versus revenge, retribution, and retaliation, blood and fire, love and light. One is much more satisfying than the other. One is much more satisfying than the other, viscerally satisfying. But it's not the same. They don't lead to the same outcomes because they're not the same input. One is very difficult and the other is very difficult. One is very expensive, the other is very expensive. But one is much more viscerally appealing to the wronged being. The person who has been wronged in our mammalian mind wants to be able to retaliate, wants to be able to seek revenge. Both truths are true. You know, can I look at a victim and say, you're wrong to be angry? No. Nope, I can't. And in fact, in my work, I say, you're right to be angry. You're right. That great ape inside of you that wants to smash someone's head with a rock is not wrong. But it's also not right. And so in that framework, how is it that we find our way to understanding, mutual understanding? How is it that we find our way from pathogenic to salutogenic? How is it that we find our way from wicked and worthy to everyone is worthy of redemption, restoration? How is it that we can all do this? For me, the first and most important thing to remember in my own work is that the sacred and the profane are not separate pieces. They don't live in separate worlds. Inside one room is not more sacred than another room. Just because I, throw some holy water or burn some incense or whatever does not make something sacred. It was already sacred to begin with. So both the victim and the perpetrator are still sacred beings. Both the victim and the perpetrator are still worthy of forgiveness. And forgiveness for me is really where it all begins. Having access personally to forgiveness inside of ourselves allows us to forgive and bestow forgiveness on another. And that, for me, is one of the most challenging and ineffable acts. And it is divine beyond any measure to find forgiveness for oneself and to bestow forgiveness on another. I've seen it happen. I've felt it happen inside myself. But when I am in the presence of it, even now, I am still awed and moved by it. I'm moved by my relationship to this profound act of forgiveness. And the way that we gain forgiveness is through understanding. It's through understanding. Understanding is something that's born of empathy, right? And we frame up this word empathy, I think, in a completely unreasonable way. And I think this is born, again, of this sacred profane nonsense, that there's separation. All of us are empaths. Every single person on the planet who is a human are empaths. There are those of us who are neurodivergent. There are those of us who, the empathy centers of our brain aren't quite the same as others. There are those of us who have a different relationship to empathy. But many of us just haven't been taught, in terms of training, that's really just myelinating certain neurocircuitry to get to empathy, to achieve the states of arriving at empathy. So my ability to empathize with myself, my ability to empathize with another, my ability to empathize with someone who I've never met before is extremely important because empathy allows me to put myself into the other person's place. It is really probably something that, from an evolutionary biology standpoint, we develop to hunt better. I can track better if I understand and empathize with a creature, and so we likely developed it as a way of killing things. So anybody who says empathy is worthless, I staunchly disagree. Um, but it also can be overwhelming to empathize with someone who has wronged us, and I would never force that into someone's framework too early. But from from that framework, being able to empathize, we're able to gain understanding of the situation. So we can understand through empathizing with ourselves first that I have within me a monstrousness. I have within me a saintliness. I am neither, and I am both. It's about what I choose to do. It's about how I choose to act. It's about what I choose to do with my drives. That monstrousness, whatever it is that we're told is monstrousness, whatever it is that we see around us and say, "Oh, that's so monstrous." In the Jungian psychoanalytical model, that is relegated to the world of the shadow. World of the shadow. The shadow is where the monsters live. But we live there too, right? We have access to that same monstrousness. Anybody who's ever been a martial arts practitioner knows that actually martial arts is about functionalizing your shadow. It's about taking control of that aspect of the self and integrating it into the total self so that we are no longer victims to it. We are no longer living at the whim of an unconscious aspect of the self. We are now the conscious mover of our monstrousness. Because sometimes, in some ways, as I think I've talked about, with this death concept, everything has to die, and something has to die in order for me to live. Whether it's a plant, whether it's an animal, whatever, or it's a threat, right? Sometimes I have to defend myself. And so, am I a monster for defending myself? No. Am I a monster for seeking revenge, retribution, retaliation? Maybe, maybe not. Because again, this saintly versus monster distinction is failed. It's flawed. It has at its heart a foolishness. It has at its heart a willingness and a desire to draw a distinction that sets me free from my responsibility to that truth. And so, because I know I can hurt people, I must take full responsibility for my capacity to hurt people. Because I can help people, I must take full responsibility for my ability to help people. Knowing that it is my responsibility ultimately to discern what is time for what. If I have no choice other than to defend myself, I must defend myself. I'm not a monster. I just have to defend myself. I just have to live. If I come across someone who has been wronged, it is my responsibility to attempt to bring about the best possible outcome, which allows for forgiveness, which allows for restoration. Our models for the word justice in the West allude to this. In the tarot, the justice card, but all throughout the Western world, the Judeo-Christian Western world as we understand it, this idea that justice is blind. Justice is coming for you either way, whether you are rich or poor, right? I am blind to your circumstances, and I will wield the sword and the scales in equal measure. But this always brings about the fact that one of you motherfuckers is getting the sword. And so it is, I believe, a flawed and a failed concept. And I'm going to say this very specifically from the position that I don't believe in judging retroactively as, well, you're the monster, you're the victim, now we know who to punish. So we come at this from the idea of impact. We come at this from the idea of understanding, and understanding is gained through saying, I did this thing and I understand it hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And holding within oneself that that was not what I wanted to do is so hard because you have to forgive yourself for being a monster in a moment in order to accept, in order to even be able to receive forgiveness from others, knowing full well that you might not receive it, knowing full well that you might not and can't hold the other person responsible for forgiving you. You have to forgive yourself for your sins, your transgressions against another, right? So impact, victim impact statements, large scale social mediation where whole communities are able to heal from these tragic events that we see around us, right? You don't have to go very far to see tragedy in today's world. You do not have to look very far to find the facts and the figures of not statistical wrongdoing, but deep tragedy that ripples through generations to hurt people. It is on all of us to own the impacts, intended or otherwise, of our actions. And it is our responsibility as sentient thinking creatures to work our way through our feelings, process our emotions, find access to that lightness, right? Why is it that justice holds the scales? Very few people tend to think about this, that justice holds scales. Well, the goddess who holds scales actually comes to us from Egyptian mythology. The goddess Maat, M-A-A-T. There's an apostrophe in the middle there. And she was a goddess of the underworld, and she weighed the souls of the dead. She weighed your heart against the weight of a feather. And she is an important deity in my study. Because achieving a heart as light as a feather is not about not feeling empathy so I can do whatever the fuck I want. Who cares? Whatever. I didn't notice. That's not the truth of it. The truth of it is about gaining access to the ability to put down our sins. We all feel the twinge of guilt when we eat the packet of hamburger, knowing that a cow died. And again, I'm not talking about, there are exceptions to every rule. So hopefully we won't get, too pedantic about any of this. But inside ourselves, we have to be able to forgive ourselves for living, for being, for existing. We have to be validated beyond that. We have to be able to put things down. But there was a punishment if your heart was not as light as a feather, right? If your heart was heavier than the feather, you went to the underworld. If your heart was light as a feather, you went to some other version. Depends on who you ask. of reincarnative structures, right? The idea of karma in Buddhism. If you fuck up, then you might come back as a bug. Who knows? That's not. It's not useful to us. It's not useful because it waits for you to die before you're interested in doing anything about it. The distinction is drawn. It's not, it's not on me to judge. Nobody but God will judge me. Let me tell you what God will judge. Whether or not you were able to make amends for your wrongdoings or not. Right? If you're going to do wrong, you're going to drop bombs on some innocent person. You're going to rightfully or wrong, like you intentionally or unintentionally harm another. You got something to answer for. We all have something to answer for. And it's okay to have something to answer for, but we cannot let ourselves off the hook. And those of us who have been wronged have another thing to answer for. Right? We have inside of us the part that says, I just want to do harm to this person. And I have seen so many victims say, does that make me a bad person? No. No. To be wronged and to be angry does not make you a bad person. To do wrong does not make you a bad person. What you do once the thing has happened is what decides inside yourself who you want to be and how you want to be about it. I don't have to hate myself or view myself as evil, right? Because good and evil aren't things. Pathogenic isn't a thing. But in this restorative model, we all acknowledge our monstrousness and we all acknowledge our saintliness. And we acknowledge that in each moment, redemption is possible. In each moment, redemption is possible. It's just a matter of what we choose to do in that moment. It's just a matter of what we choose to do when faced with the truth of our wrongdoing. We might not even know we hurt somebody, right? We might not even know we hurt somebody. And so we're dependent on those around us to call us out, not to call us out with hatred and rocks, to call us out with truth and understanding and discernment. Hey, that hurt me. Oh my God. I need to do some work to deal with that, to come to terms with that, to figure out how I can change my own actions going forward so that I don't hurt people. We have to be able to accept our responsibility on ourselves for the redemption. There is no afterlife that's going to redeem you. This life must redeem us. This life must be our redemption. This world, to take a phrase, must be the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of consciousness, of conscience. If I have done wrong, I must make amends. If others have wronged me, I must help them to understand their wrongdoing so that they might gain the understanding of self and move beyond the action, move beyond the limited framework of action that motivated the harm. How is it that we can do this work? We do this work together. We do this work in communities. We do this work humbly, slowly, lovingly, respectfully, We do this work with an understanding of what trauma does to us, what trauma does to humans, what trauma does to a world of humans traumatized. It is on us, it is on all of us to build and to make a better world. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. It's a cliche, but it's true. It is satisfying to seek retribution, revenge, and retaliation. But if we seek to build a new world, if we seek to make a better world, we will only do it through reconciliation, redemption, and restoration. All must be worthy of these things. And so we move beyond a pathogenic model and we operate from a salutogenic model. I'll talk more about that in the future. I'm sure Biz and I will have lots to say about that. But that's what we do. That's how we do this work. That's how we make a better world together. And so that is our work. That is what the Wandering Ministry is about. That is what our year has been about. And I turn 35 soon. I've spent 35 years trying to learn how to do this. Hopefully, I spend the next 35 years, if I'm blessed and lucky, doing it. And so I wish you all a blessed equinox. The scales are completely balanced. In about 30 minutes, the sun will go into its complete balance point. Can we balance our scales? Can we seek and bestow forgiveness? Can we hold all beings as worthy today? Can we act in a way which is inviting forgiveness and redemption into our world? Or will we seek to satisfy our animal urge for revenge and retribution and retaliation? It's prescient times. There's no time like today. So, good luck out there. Blessings be upon you all. Have a good day.